Hello, this is the Quadraphonic Mixer mode on the Disting EX. This is a conceptually simple algorithm. It's a 6-input quadraphonic mixer. What is quadraphonic? We should probably have a recap of that. So quadraphonic is a spatial audio format that's been around for a long time. It was actually implemented on some of the early Buchla synthesizers. Essentially you have 4 speakers arranged usually in a roughly equal square around the listeners, unlike some spatial formats like designed for modern things like cinema, where you've got very much a front and a back. This is very much everybody's equal, front left, front right, rear left, rear right, and they're all roughly equally important. So to hear this properly, you're going to need 4 speakers. This is pretty much impossible on YouTube as far as I can gather. So what I've done for this video is I've taken these 4 outputs and they're rendered into a binaural format for listening, which as far as YouTube is concerned is just stereo. So you'll want to be listening to this on headphones to actually get that binaural effect when I start panning these things around. So let's just run through it. So it's 6 inputs, like I say, 4 outputs. Obviously, if you want to start CV mapping things like I'm going to do in a minute, you're going to lose some inputs to CV. So there's always a trade-off between the number of inputs you can mix and the number of CVs you can use. This makes it a perfect opportunity to control the EX through MIDI or I2C to do the panning controls and mixing and leave all your inputs free for mixing. So what I'll do in this particular case is I'm just going to use this Everton RF Nomad as a noise source, really, because that's pleasant to listen to, and I find it quite easy to hear the spatialization in headphones, unlike some other sounds where it can be hard to tell where they're coming from. So that sounds like that, and that's just being mixed into the middle at the moment, and then as you'd expect you just have a gain, so you can control the gain of that sound. That's easy enough. And then for each of the 6 channels you can mix, you have the same controls. You've got gain, choice of coordinates, which is rectangular or polar, which I'll come back to, and then those 2 coordinates, and then a choice of spinner and spin radius and spin phase. So I'll come to the spinners later again. So coordinates, rectangular or polar. Rectangular coordinates basically means you have left and right, and backwards and forwards. So if I change the X, rectangular, yeah. So at the moment it's in the middle, X 0, Y 0. If I change the X from left through to right, you should hear that moving across. And similarly, if I put that back in the middle and change the Y from back to front, you should hear that move. Polar coordinates is, rather than X and Y, you have an angle and a radius. So radius, with any angle, is always just going to be in the middle. Move the radius out and then start changing the angle. Then this one control now should spin it around at the radius that we set. So it's just 2 different ways of specifying a point and a plane, really, mathematically speaking. And of course, if we're using rectangular coordinates, then that's perfect for connecting up a joystick. I've got my little dirt for CV joystick thing here, and the default CV mapping on this algorithm is to have X on input 5 and Y on input 6. And that's our outputs, by the way. I think I mentioned that earlier. So we'll plug X into there, and then we'll plug the Y into here. And we're definitely on rectangular. Yes, so now if I move the joystick around, you should hear it doing its thing. So that should be front left, front right, rear left. So you can have all kinds of fun throwing your sounds around the room as you play them. Obviously it's a CV, you can automate that as you wish. Now, I mentioned previously that each of these channels has a spinner. One of the I guess, trivially easy and sometimes overused things you can do in Quad is just to have the sound spinning round and round and round. So if that's what you want to do, that's built into this algorithm. So rather than just each channel having its own settings, each channel gets to choose which spinner it uses, and then channels can share spinners. And why would you want to do that? Because it seems to be overcomplicating it. The reason is, if channels share spinners, then you can offset them around that spin, and then you can have things that spin round, kind of chasing each other around a circle. So it allows you to do that. I've only got one sound here, so you won't hear that, but I'll go through it anyway. So, say input 1, spinner 1, we'll give it some radius, and then we'll leave the phase at 0. So that's where if you had two sounds you wanted them to be, say, in quadrature going around a circle, you could set the phase there. And then if we skip through channels 2, 3, 4, and 5, and 6, we get to the spinners. So we're using spinner 1, and we'll change the rate. And now you should hear that's kind of swooshing round. Slow it down a bit. And then we can very rapidly get into torrid seasickness territory if we have that going too fast. And then if we go the other way through 0, it'll start spinning in the other direction. Like so. So we'll just go back to the spin control. So there we go. And we'll just put that back to 0 and it will stop spinning. So that's the spinners. Now there's a few kind of utility controls right at the end of the list. Overall gain is as you'd expect. It makes everything louder or quieter. And then you've got front gain and rear gain. If you need to separately balance the two speaker pairs, maybe you can't actually get 4 of the same speakers and you've ended up with 2 stereo PAs pressed into service as a quad PA, you might want to adjust the gain separately. So actually front adjusts the front and rear adjusts the rear. And similarly, you've got tone controls for front and bass to again cope with that situation. Well, either to problem solve the situation where your PAs don't sound quite the same, or to deliberately make the front and back different, if that's what you choose to do. So, yeah, just simple tone controls, front and back, treble and bass. And then that's a saturation control, so that's in common with a lot of the algorithms on the EX. If you want it to saturate rather than clip, you can turn that on. That stops, if your levels get too high, it's just going to kind of crush it, which usually sounds better than actual digital distortion, so that's on by default. And that's it. That's our quadraphonic mixer on the Disting EX. I would just say in the user manual there's a little link to a video of me using this in a gig to make sure it worked, which we actually did in Quadraphonic, set up 4 speakers. And again, the recording on YouTube is binaural, so you get some kind of sense of the spatialization that we're able to achieve with this mode. So enjoy that, and that's it for now. Cheers.